The weather outside was inclement, and sitting by the window, Rebecca looked at the large snowflakes dancing and whirling in the gusts of strong wind. Something was eating away at the woman. She was in a terrible mood. Why did I even move here? Why did I listen to Floyd? And here's where it got me. Rebecca thought sadly, brushing away a tear. The thing was that the woman used to live in Chicago. There she met a man named Floyd Thompson, who was visiting from out of town and charmed the woman at first sight. The young people dated for about 6 months, after which they decided to live together. Since Rebecca was renting her home at the time, the man suggested that she move in with him. Floyd lived in a small, provincial town in Illinois, which Rebecca really liked at first. Her boyfriend was caring and attentive, and what else could the almost 22-year-old woman want? Unfortunately, as soon as the young people got married, life together cooled their hearts, previously heated by passion. Since it was hard to find work in the small town, Rebecca got a job as a store assistant in a roadside shop, where the owner immediately took a liking to the young beauty. Spencer Williams was a married man in his 40s who had long been assigned the title of a shameless womanizer. Of course, Rebecca made it clear right off the bat that she didn't like what the store owner was hinting at, but it seemed to have no effect whatsoever on the philanderer. Basically, Spencer harassed the woman, getting even more persistent every time she pushed him away. "Why are you fighting this? I'll get what I want anyway. None of the workers have ever managed to make a fool out of me," said Spencer, pestering the girl in a dark, stuffy back room. "Mr. Wallace, you may have forgotten, but I'm married. And even if I wasn't, I don't believe in getting involved with someone at work," Rebecca exclaimed angrily and pushed the annoying boss away. Of course, this rejection caused a lot of hard feelings. Spencer was very angry with the woman, and he reminded her of it every chance he got. Rebecca knew she needed to quit this job a while ago, but she didn't want to be a burden to her husband. Floyd worked as a manager for a small company, selling construction materials. His salary wasn't that big, so Rebecca couldn't really afford to become a housewife. Meanwhile, Floyd always stayed late at work, coming home well after midnight. Rebecca repeatedly noticed that her husband smelled of woman's perfume, but the man always came up with a logical explanation, repeatedly claiming that it was just an absurd accident. Being a naive young woman, Rebecca sincerely believed her husband at first. However, when she noticed traces of lipstick on the collar of Floyd's shirt, she realized that her husband was cheating on her. And the man himself has actually changed a lot, gradually turning into an unbearable tyrant. 2 days earlier, Floyd came home drunk and said right from the doorway, "That's it. I'm leaving you for Pamela. We love each other and we want to live together." Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes, but her callous husband didn't seem to care the least bit. He went about his business as if nothing had happened, eating dinner made by his caring wife, and then he went to bed. Rebecca spent most of that night in tears, only getting a hold of herself when her eyes became all red and swollen from crying so much. Now, sitting by the window, the woman was trying to figure out what she should do next. Rebecca knew that Floyd's new lover was the head of the department in which her husband worked. Of course, how could I compete with the rich woman? She has money, her own car, and a beautiful house on Main Street, the woman thought, realizing that she wouldn't be able to stay under the same roof with her husband for much longer. Rebecca looked at the passers-by, shivering in the piercing winter wind, busy with her own thoughts. Suddenly, a strange old man caught the woman's attention. He was dressed in a light jacket, trampled boots, and battered trousers. There was a shabby cap on the stranger's head, which didn't seem to be of much use given the weather. The old man kept stomping his feet, obviously trying to keep himself warm this way. The poor fellow looked like a homeless man who ended up on the street at the most inopportune moment. Dear God, he's freezing. His lips have turned blue and his beard is covered with frost, thought Rebecca anxiously, feeling very worried for the weak old man. The woman thought for a minute or two, and then threw her jacket over her shoulder and ran out onto the street, where a snowstorm was raging with all its might. "Hello, sir. Forgive me for asking, but what are you doing out here alone? And in this weather?" Rebecca asked as she came closer to the old man. "Hello, ma'am. I'm actually waiting for my son, but he's late for some reason," the old man murmured, shivering in the piercing wind. "What son? Who will come get him in such weather? He's probably just out of his mind," Rebecca thought, trying desperately not to let her realization show on her face. Taking the stranger by the hand, the woman almost forced him to go inside the house, where she immediately seated him in an armchair in front of the bright burning fireplace. Then, Rebecca brought the old man a change of her husband's clothes so that he could dry out his wet clothes. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm very grateful. At least 24 people passed by me today, and you're the only one who offered to help," the old man said with tears in his eyes. And when Rebecca poured a hot tea for the stranger, a huge smile appeared on his face. Taking a sip of the tart burning drink, the old man said his name was Richard Miller. "My son will certainly come pick me up as soon as the blizzard subsides a little. We're going to Chicago together," the stranger added, stretching out his wrinkled hands towards the fireplace. Mr. Miller no longer seemed crazy to Rebecca. As it turned out, he was an ordinary old man who was tired of loneliness and illness and decided to move to live with his son in the big city. Mr. Miller stayed at Rebecca's house until noon, and after thanking the girl heartily, started getting ready, afraid to miss his son's arrival. "Be careful, Mr. Miller, and feel free to come back if you need to," the woman said in parting. Rebecca was very doubtful that his son would come for him in such a blizzard. But as soon as the old man went out into the street, an SUV covered in snow slowed down next to him. There were 2 more cars behind, which apparently had bodyguards in them. Opening the passenger door, Mr. Miller turned around and took one last look at the house, where he was treated with so much warmth and respect. Then he smiled and got into the huge Ford. Rebecca smiled back and waved at the departing car. The woman was very happy that she got to do something nice. She helped the old man out, and she was feeling good about it. Rebecca felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that the old man wasn't crazy at all and was in fact waiting for his son's arrival. The woman was about to close the front door when she saw a rapidly approaching car. The Chevrolet roared its engine strainingly, pushing its way through the snowdrifts that were blocking its path. To Rebecca's great amazement, the car pulled up in front of her house. Who could it be, especially in this weather? The woman thought as she zipped up her jacket. But when the driver's door of the Chevrolet opened, Rebecca saw a woman sitting behind the wheel. Her face seemed very familiar. "So are you just going to stand there and stare at me? Or will you invite me to come in eventually?" asked the stranger dressed in a fur coat, smiling. "Diana? Is it really you? How did you get here? I haven't seen you in so long. Come in, exclaimed Rebecca and cordially opened the door for the woman. Diana lived in Chicago and was her best friend, with whom she always shared all her most intimate secrets. Today's visit was no exception. Rebecca couldn't stop crying as she told her guest about her marital problems. Diana listened attentively to her friend and then took her hand and said, "Wow, honey, tell me one thing. What are you still doing here, in his house? So I suggest you pack your things right now and go back to Chicago. I have a small business there now. You can stay with me until you get your own place. I'm renting a beautiful house downtown. You'll fall in love with it immediately. It costs me a lot, but that's life. You have to pay for everything." Rebecca looked gratefully into her friend's eyes and then began packing her things. Diana simply said out loud what the woman had been thinking about for several days, but didn't dare do it on her own. And now that she had her best friend's support, Rebecca felt a surge of strength and energy that gave her confidence in the future. The woman no longer had to endure the boss's harassment and put up with their cheating husband, who seemed to have become completely indifferent to Rebecca's feelings. It only took Rebecca half an hour to get all her stuff packed, and soon she was already sitting in her friend's cozy new Chevrolet. Diana smiled encouragingly and started the engine. Rebecca leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. For the first time in days, the woman felt completely calm and relaxed. Rebecca felt that she was starting a new life, which would have no place for a womanizer boss and an unfaithful husband. Soon, the woman fell asleep, lulled by the measured noise of a running engine. She woke up only when the lights of Chicago were already visible ahead. Rebecca was an orphan and spent her childhood at an orphanage. But nevertheless, the woman was very fond of her hometown, which she knew like the back of her hand. And when the friend showed Rebecca her rented home, she couldn't help but scream in surprise. "Oh God, it's so beautiful and cozy here. It's an amazing place," the girl said with delight in her voice. "Yes, the place is nice. I'm thinking about buying it, and I've already started saving up money. I hope that in 5 years I'll get the amount I need," said Diana, admiring the beautiful view outside the window. Rebecca only sighed in response, ashamed that she would be living with her friend for free. But Diana didn't even want to hear anything about it and insisted that Rebecca should stop worrying. "Don't worry, settle in, relax. Come to your senses and only then start looking for a job," advised her friend, giving Rebecca a pat on the shoulder as a show of support. But despite all Diana's exhortations, Rebecca started looking for a job the very next day. She began calling firms and offices, asking if they were hiring. Unfortunately, finding a good job wasn't all that easy, and her search took Rebecca a lot of time and effort. One day, when she was talking on the phone with yet another potential employer, someone knocked loudly and persistently on the door. Wondering who it could be, Rebecca opened the door and saw a delivery man with a letter in his hand. Having signed for the delivery, the woman saw that it was addressed to her. Rebecca carefully opened the envelope and then pulled out a sheet of stamps and typescript. Quickly running her eyes through it, the woman exclaimed in surprise, "Oh God, this can't actually be happening." Then, when Rebecca calmed down a little, she read the bank notice again. It said that a bank account had been opened in her name. But the most surprising part was that the account had an amount with 6 zeros in it. At first, Rebecca thought that it was some kind of a mistake, and so she went to the bank and they confirmed it. But the woman was even more shocked when she found out who opened the bank account in her name and deposited the huge amount in it. The mysterious benefactor of the astonished woman was Alan Miller, who turned out to be none other than the son of Richard Miller, the man she helped out a few days earlier in a terrible snowstorm. Upon learning who made the deposit, Rebecca couldn't contain her emotions and burst into tears right in the bank lobby. The woman couldn't believe that there were still people in the world who valued kindness. Rebecca didn't know that Alan Miller was a millionaire for whom the health of his father meant so much more than any amount of money. He didn't even know that his elderly father went out of his house in a blizzard and that he couldn't get back. However, he was very much impressed by what Rebecca did to help the old man when everyone else passed him indifferently. Soon, Rebecca used the money she got to buy the house Diana was renting. She wanted to repay her friend for her kindness and thus bought her friend her dream house as a Christmas gift. And the rest of the money, Rebecca invested in her own business, which she dreamed of running all those years. Not a day goes by when Rebecca doesn't say a mental thank you to Mr. Miller, wishing him eternal health and happiness for giving her such an opportunity in life.